I'm realizing as Devin was introducing us, thank you, Devin, for that I need to update the Who Are We slide because I don't know how time works because it says 2 years ago and it's actually now 3 years ago. So Ian, anything you want to say on this slide before we move on to the next one, since Devin did such a lovely job introducing us?
I don't think so. The only thing that wasn't in my bio was that I use he, they. So just keep an eye on that, please.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So this is what we're going to cover today. We're going to do, well, all the things that are on the screen. And actually the title is in a slightly different order than this slide is. That's okay. We'll get through everything we promised. We promise. So just very quickly, those of you who know me, and I believe there's some of you in this room, I communicate largely through memes. And as Ian and I were talking about this presentation, I kept coming back to this one, which is one of my favorites. That's just the guy who says, people with ADHD after being told to just focus. My goodness, what an idea. Why didn't I think of that? So that's sort of the genesis for the title of this presentation, and also for hopefully some of the strategies that we will share today that will help. But also, I know I'm hoping we have some friends in the audience who also have ideas and tips to share, because I think that when we think about wellness and work-life balance, and productivity for people with ADHD, that is the thing that many of us are the worst at. So, so please feel free to jump in and talk to us. All right, so we're going to just do a quick overview and introduction. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. Yes, memes are the best. So just so you're aware, here's some statistics about ADHD. Since so many librarians are women, I like to point out that boys are more likely to present with ADHD before puberty. Girls are more likely to present during or after. Also, the ways that girls typically present are seen as more socially acceptable. And, they're more likely to be inattentive. As Devin said in my introduction, I was the kid who stared out the window, which was fine because I wasn't being actively disruptive in class. So that was seen as okay. Because I wasn't causing a problem for other people. Ian, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, just a couple of things to think about there. So like Amy was saying, roughly 82% of librarians are women. So not only is it likely that any librarians that you know will have been diagnosed post-puberty or well into adulthood, but it's also very, very likely that librarians that you work with are ADHD or have ADHD, depending on how you think about it. Just, no armchair psychology, please. But, be aware that there are a lot out there.
Yeah, I'll say that Ian and I have done a couple of different presentations on sort of different related topics at different presentations. And the question that I have seen most recently, probably because I'm a female person, is, so how did you go about getting a diagnosis? Which is really interesting because that's not really, I didn't really think that, I don't know, I didn't think about that being the outcome. So if that is a question, my email address is at the end and you can feel free to reach out to me. I know that there's, I believe, somebody in this room who I talked to when I was the beginning of this journey, and I am incredibly grateful to that person. So thank you. You know who you are, I imagine. All right.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the relationship between librarians and ADHD. This is just a brief history of ADHD, a couple of milestones. A lot of people think of ADHD as some fad or some newfangled thing. It actually goes back to the 19th century. 1844, Dr. Heinrich Hoffmann was the first one to write about these behavioral patterns in a scientific fashion. Throughout the 1900s, it's been thought about in various ways. Everything from a defect of moral control to being related to brain damage in returning soldiers, to being a result of encephalitis. Um, in 1968, it got the name hyperkinetic reaction of childhood, which was a very male-focused, what we would call hyperactive focused view of ADHD at the time. When the DSM-3 rolled around in 1980, it got its name attention deficit disorder. And then in 87 was renamed attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And it's maintained that name, ADHD, throughout editions 4 and 5 of the DSM. But some of the details within that have shifted between there being types or 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 exactly how to look for symptoms or behavioral patterns that go along with it.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to just jump right in to the main content and talk a little bit about productivity, which I don't know, if you have ADHD, the little subtitle here might resonate with you. So one of the main obstacles to productivity is needing to constantly trick your brain to get things done, which we'll talk about. It'll be a theme throughout our presentation. So as far as why productivity is uniquely difficult for people with ADHD, there's a couple of reasons. Obviously, like these are some big ones. It's hard for a lot of folks with ADHD to break down a huge project into smaller, more manageable pieces. We also tend to struggle with time frames, especially if we don't have a deadline. It can be really difficult for us to prioritize things appropriately. So just to be positive, we're not great at starting projects because we can't break them down into smaller tasks. We have a hard time wrapping up projects, but by golly, we are really good in the middle of a project. So there's that. We also tend to have a lot of great ideas, be able to build upon other people's ideas, but following through is a little bit more difficult for us. Yes.
Yeah, ADHD people tend to be idea people. One of my greatest struggles, it's on here, is overcoming the wall of awful. I get this idea, it's a great idea, and then I just have so much trouble getting started on the actual work of it. And so like a lot of times people will talk about people with ADHD having trouble with procrastination. And they'll talk about like, oh, if you want to do it, then you'll end up doing it. No, like I procrastinate on everything. Um, Even if it's something that I really, really want to do.
Right. Yeah. And also I think, and I'm not sure honestly from like a brain function standpoint how this is related, but there's a high comorbidity rate between ADHD and anxiety. So I think that has a lot to do with this as well. I mean, it's paralyzing to try to start a huge project because your brain is actively trying to stop you, but also because there's anxiety about, is it good enough? Why did somebody try to make me do this project? I'm not good enough to do this project. So there's some of that sort of tied up in all of this as well. If you have ADHD and don't have anxiety, congratulations. That's wonderful. So we have some tips. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but we were just going to highlight a couple that work particularly well for each of us. I'm a huge fan of body doubling, and if anybody works with me, they probably have been asked by me to hop on a Teams and body double. So body doubling is just basically it's parallel working. So it's either, sitting in a room with somebody who's also working on something while you are working on something. It can also be done virtually. You can just sit on a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting and work on something while someone else is working on something completely separate. It can be anything. It's just knowing that somebody else is also working on something is extremely helpful for me. It feels like accountability. It's really not, because the other person is not saying, "Hey, are you working right now?" But just having that person is really helpful. And I think there are YouTube channels where people will, their YouTube videos are them folding laundry, so that you can watch the YouTube video and fold your laundry while the person is folding their laundry. And some people do this as live videos. Some people just record videos of them doing laundry. But all these things are ways of kind of helping your brain, work, because there's somebody working near you. So that's one thing that I find extremely helpful. I'm also going to talk about brain dumping. Brain dumping is very helpful for me as well. That's just the act of getting everything out of your brain. If my brain is swirling because I have too many things that I need to work on, I just sit and write it all down. Just try to just make a list. It's going to be ugly, but I just need to get it all down on paper, and then I can go and start, prioritizing, trying to break things down into tasks and all that.
I'm also a huge fan of body doubling. For me, it uses my anxiety to trick my ADHD, because I sit there, if I'm not working, I sit there and I say, well, I'm going to have to tell them I did something, so I'd better get something done. There's no guarantee. Usually a body double won't even ask if you got anything done, but just in case they do,
They
I
might.
have to get something done. And then also I'm a huge fan. Some of you have noticed the Pomodoros, some of you in the chat. I'm a huge fan of the Pomodoros method. I'm a 25-minute, 5-minute man myself. I know some people can do a 50-minute, 10-minute cycle on Pomodoros. Congratulations, you have much more endurance than I do. But interval working, which Pomodoro is just a variation on interval working, can be great, as long as you do also have yes, yeah, I saw that in the chat, Carrie. As long as you are able to pick momentum back up once you stop. That is the each of these has a weakness. And not all of these are going to work for everybody. That's why we have so many ideas and why there's so many more out there.
Does anyone in the chat see any of these things that we've written and say, wow, I have no idea what you're talking about? Because if you do, throw them in the chat and we can just talk about them very briefly. And if these are all things that y'all are comfortable with, familiar with, then we can move on. Shay, I will talk about habit stacking. So habit stacking is I'm sure it's from other places, but I first read about it in Atomic Habits. And basically it's just the idea of if there's a habit that you already have, to just tack another habit onto that habit. Developing habits is very difficult for people with ADHD. A lot of people will do things until they just become part of your routine. And I've actually I had no idea. I thought I was the only person who had a really hard time building habits, but apparently that's pretty common with ADHD people. So for me, this probably sounds kind of sad to neurotypical people, but for me, I get up in the morning and, what I do first thing, I go into the bathroom. And since I'm already there, I brush my teeth. I don't leave the bathroom. I just brush my teeth while I'm in there. So that's habit stacking. It's taking something that I already did and adding another task after that. But of course, I can never, ever, ever not do that, because then it will never happen again. But yeah, so it's just the idea of taking something you already do and adding on something new.
And then just one thing got added to this list while we were talking, in the chat. Somebody brought up having different desks for different tasks, which I've come across as being called task-based workstations. which is also very helpful to me.
Yes, yeah, we left that one off here. Yes, in our NC Live presentation, or NCLA presentation, which we can share slides if anybody's interested. We talk about task-based workstations there, which is a really cool idea as well. Also, yeah, whenever I make a to-do list, at the top of it, I always write, make a to-do list. And then when I'm done making the to-do list, I cross it off, and then I've done something on my to-do list, which is just enough for my brain to feel like it can tackle something else. So just throwing that out there.
Yay, dopamine boost.
That's right. Just,
We'll talk more
whatever.
about that later.
Yes. Okay. So that was just kind of a quick dive into productivity, but now we're going to switch and talk a little bit about work-life balance, which is another thing that can be difficult for folks with ADHD. It is very easy for work to spill over into non-work time because we struggle with deadlines and time management. I also should put time blindness in here because I didn't think about that at the time, but time blindness is also an issue. And hyperfocus can cause this issue as well. You can get really started on a project and look up and, it's 6 o'clock and my children need to be picked up somewhere and I have forgotten because I've been really focused on a task. So that can be difficult. It's also hard to stop thinking about work when you're at home or thinking about home when you're at work. Ian and I had a good conversation a couple weeks ago about auditory processing. I mean, I don't think not every person with ADHD has difficulty with auditory processing, but some of us, it's just delayed enough that we continue like thinking after conversations are over and problem solving, and those solutions tend to come to me at least several hours later, which means that while I'm like processing something at home, I'm not fully present. So that is, I think, a very difficult problem. Ian, you want to talk about intrusive thoughts?
Yeah, intrusive thoughts and rumination can also be very, very difficult. Um, Particularly when you're at home, trying to be at home instead of at work. Well, I suppose it goes either way because you could be ruminating on something that happened at the house while you're trying to get something done. Or you could have, intrusive thoughts about, just what you're going to do when you get home, all those fun things that you can do that you can't do at work. Or you can be at work and just be like, oh my God, why did I say that in front of my boss? And just like kill yourself over it because you had, an instance of compulsive speech and it probably wasn't even a big deal, but now what do they think of me? And it can make it hard to be present. And that's one of the reasons why people who take the medical approach to ADHD call it attention deficiency or attention deficit, is that it looks like we're not paying attention, but we are, just not in the ways that we or the people around us want to. It's more of a directional problem than a deficiency problem.
Right. Sorry about that. Okay.
And so this is, speaking of the medical model, this is a little bit of kind of the medical why of what we're talking about here today. ADHD is linked to dopamine processing. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's part of the reward system in our brains. And people with ADHD tend to have issues processing dopamine. I have yet to understand myself whether that's an issue with creating dopamine in our brain to reward ourselves with, or with having the receptors or things like that. But it's connected there, and dopamine has to do with memory, motivation, attention, mood, learning, all of the things that people with ADHD struggle with on a regular basis. Um, Serotonin also comes in, but from what I understand, it's mostly dopamine. And this ties in to what Amy was saying about memes. Memes will hit you with funny after funny after funny, quick, 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 and that's dopamine, 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 dopamine. Um, when you write your to-do list, if you put write to-do list at the top, like Amy does, and when you're done writing your list, you cross that off, that's a dopamine hit right off the top, right? And that's why I have an issue with my wall of awful, is because most projects ramp up slowly. I don't get those dopamine hits early. And so, you know, being able to recognize and reward yourself for what you're having issues with externally can cause an internal dopamine hit as well. And so that's the crossing off the list. That's the, oh my goodness, I actually got started on this project. I have a paragraph. Oh, yes, okay. Now I can open up this box of candy to munch on while I finish up the rest of the paper, you know. And so then that creates that dopamine flow externally rather than as part of the work.
So some tips. I feel like I can't help but notice, but we have fewer tips for this. I can't imagine why that is. Um, so I read a book recently that was called 30 Days to Break Up with Your Phone, which is actually very good. It's by, I think it's Catherine Price. The citation is at the end, but some of the things that she talks about in that book are very helpful for this as well. One thing is the idea of speed bumps, and speed bumps kind of in the context of breaking up with your phone are things like uninstalling social media apps. So it doesn't stop you. You can still log into twitter.com. That's what I will call it forever, or facebook.com, but it's more difficult than just tapping on the app. So those speed bumps are things that are meant to delay you and give you time to think about whether or not you actually want to do this thing at this moment. So one thing that I have done, I haven't taken email off my phone, which I know that that is a tip that a lot of people say is very important for work-life balance, but I've turned off all the notifications so I don't see that little red circle with the number in it. And luckily, I guess because of my ADHD, I am able to just ignore it because there's not that little red circle screaming at me. So that has helped me because I could be getting emails, but I don't know it. So I'm able to just ignore them and do the things that I need to be able to do at home with my family. And another tip from Price that has been super helpful is instead of saying things like, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't check my email after hours, because there's some shame in that, right? If you say, oh, I shouldn't do that, I shouldn't be, talking to people about work after work hours. There's shame involved when you do it, right? But to reframe your thinking into, I don't do that. I don't check my email after work, or I don't check my email between 6 and 9 p.m. or whatever whatever particular parameters you would like to place around that, but just not making it a value judgment. This is a thing. These are things that I do. These are things that I don't do. And that has been really helpful for me because it's more black and white. It's like, I don't do this anymore. And if I do it, then I don't feel as guilty about it because I've kind of taken the value judgment out of that.
My favorite thing on this list is transition rituals. I'm a huge proponent of these. Um, so a transition ritual is something where you have two tasks and one might bleed into the other. You might want to keep focusing on the first, um, and it would distract you from the second, and you need to get the second done. So you create an activity that happens in between. A great example of this is if you have a commute well, most people are going to have a commute between home and work. These days, sometimes that commutes from bed to couch, and that's fine. But there's still that little bit of distance. And what you can do is have your going to work playlist. And you just play a couple of songs on that playlist, and that creates a signal. It's kind of habit blocking, what was the word?
Habit stacking.
Habit stacking. Thank you. It's kind of habit stacking. I have this habit of having fun on my way to work because let's face it, commutes are terrible. And so I'm also going to use it to get into that work frame of mind. And then you can do the same thing on the way home. You can have a different playlist for going home.
Or you can listen
You
to
can take
historical romance audiobooks on your way home. Just an idea.
yes. You can have before a meeting, you can have like a 5 minute YouTube video that you listen to where it's just water sounds or rain or whatever, right? Where it's like, okay, I had my project, now it's time to go to this meeting. Or you can have a snack, drink some water, get up, move around a little bit, do 2 or 3 jumping jacks, not much more than that because nobody wants to go into a meeting stanky, but something.
And for those of you who don't spend as much time in ADHD memeland as I do, there's like an entire genre of ADHD memes of along the theme of, I have a meeting at 2 o'clock, so I can't do anything until then. So I think transition rituals can be very helpful with that. To just kind of say, okay, I can get some stuff done but I know I have this meeting later, but there's this thing I do in between to help prepare me, because there's probably thousands of memes that kind of go along those lines, because that is a thing. For me, it's a fear of missing it or of losing track of time. And so I'll think, okay, I've got this meeting in an hour, so I can't start on anything new because I know that, I might miss my meeting or whatever. So that transition rituals are really helpful for that as well. All right. So are there any other, I'll ask the same question I asked last time, anything on this list that, yeah, oh yeah, Shay, I'm with you. My commute is not, I don't know, it's probably not that bad compared to a lot of people, but it is long. And so the audiobook has really helped me. I listen to audiobooks constantly, sometimes podcasts. But it has made that experience a lot more positive, and I feel more decompressed. When I was working from home, that commute that Ian was talking about between, the bed and the desk or whatever, was too short, and I didn't have time to decompress. So I actually have a new appreciation for my commute, which is very strange. Not a place I thought I would ever be. All right, any thoughts on any of these before we move along? Or other thoughts, I guess I should say. Okay. Oh yeah. Maria mentioned the Freedom app, and I think that she talks about that one in the How to Break Up with Your Phone thing, because it blocks certain apps during certain amounts of time or certain times. I do that with time limits on my iPhone. I'll set 30 minutes a day for certain things. And of course I can always override that, but that's a speed bump. I have to go in, I have to say, yes, I want to spend another, whatever it is, 15 minutes, hour. So that's just an extra step to like, do I really need to do this? Do I really need to keep reading my email, or can I stop and focus on my home or whatever, my hobbies? All right, so there we go. Okay, so wellness. Of these 3 things, this is the one that I'm the worst at, and that's really saying a lot based on the first 2. But so, this is a quote that, I don't know, it's probably not that bad compared to a lot of people, but it is long. So this is a quote that, I think that she talks about that one in the How to Break Up with Your Phone thing, because it blocks certain apps during certain amounts of time or certain times. I do that with time limits on my iPhone. I'll set 30 minutes a day for certain things. And of course I can always override that, but that's a speed bump. I have to go in, I have to say, yes, I want to spend another, whatever it is, 15 minutes, hour. So that's just an extra step to like, do I really need to do this? Do I really need to keep reading my email, or can I stop and focus on my home or whatever, my hobbies? I don't know if I changed this. Maybe I didn't change it. Um, so this is a quote that I found on the internet. Um, and maybe Camus wrote it, maybe Camus didn't write it. One of my coworkers who has ADHD went on a deep dive so that I didn't have to, which I really appreciated because it's very tempting. And believes that maybe he got this from someone else. But anyway, I just like the quote. Nobody realizes that some people expend tremendous energy merely to be normal. That is certainly not true, not just true of folks with ADHD and other um, neurodivergent conditions, but I think it is absolutely true for folks with ADHD. We do spend a lot of energy to try to act normal. And there, of course, are a lot more reasons than masking that wellness is so important for folks with ADHD, but I think that it's just really important to acknowledge how, what masking is and how much of a part of our lives it can be. And of course, again, masking certainly not exclusive to folks with ADHD, but it's the act of modifying your behavior to fit in with societal norms. And this, it can include all these things. And I think that it's important to point out because it is exhausting. It's exhausting to try with all your focus to listen to a conversation so that you're ready. It's exhausting to keep your mouth shut when you want to jump in and start talking. It is exhausting to be early or to, practice the pizza delivery call before you make it because it's super like stressful to call and try to order something, order your dinner on the phone. And also I would just like to say that this came up, we presented at ECU a little over a week ago. And I was talking to one of the folks after this session about, since I was diagnosed in my 40s, I kind of had this when I figured out that masking is not, I think masking is often associated with autism, but obviously ADHD folks do it as well. And I kind of had this crisis where I was like, wait, who am I? Am I like, if I've been masking my entire life, and if I have been, who am I? So that's a terrifying question to have to confront. So just, this is all, I say all this just to say this is all exhausting, physically exhausting, mentally exhausting. And it's one of the many reasons why it's super important for folks with ADHD to prioritize wellness.
Yeah, somebody in the chat a little while ago was talking about just being able to like not pay attention on online classes without like bombarding the chat with memes. I mean, I recently graduated, but up until then, I was very much the same way. I was constantly on the chat. I was always saying something, always responding. And in our ECU presentation on the 10th, I talked a little bit about how um, because I'm that way and because people often find constant response annoying, I get it in my head that I am annoying. And so I constantly have to like go back and forth between, you know, is this what the chat is there for? Is this an appropriate way for me to be using the chat to help me to pay attention? Or is this being distracting to the other students? And where's that balance? Because while I do have to think about my personal wellness, there's also the class wellness. And some of that's my responsibility. Some of it's the responsibility of people to call me out. Um, so, you know,
Yep. And this is, I think, another time, and someone pointed out in the chat, which I was absolutely correct, and I didn't mention, but should have, that this is also common for folks with chronic illness and things like that. But I think that is also another place where the intersection between ADHD and anxiety comes into play, because I think that, that masking probably is often because partly at least due to anxiety and fear of being seen as different or not fitting in. And I think that again just kind of contributes to how exhausting it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's really just as simple as ableism causes people with disabilities to need to appear to feel the need to appear normal. And that's masking. And working that hard at anything causes anxiety,
Mhm.
which will eventually become clinical and chronic.
Yep. Yeah. So this is, I mean, it's a good thing to keep in mind. And you're right. It's definitely rooted in ableism and the idea of societal norms and the idea that there is one, specific way to be in the world if you want to be accepted, which is very difficult for people who don't fit that particular mold. So wellness. So this is really, again, if you don't if you don't struggle with ADHD or another neurodivergent condition or chronic illness or something like that, these steps, these questions may seem, I don't know what the
Pedantic.
word. Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah. Some people might look at this and say, I would never even consider these things. But the YouTube channel, How to ADHD is incredible. She's a wonderful, like she's fun to watch, and has a lot of really good information. But these are all really good questions and there are more, but in the interest of full disclosure, I didn't watch the whole 3-minute video. But these are all some good questions to ask ourselves. The ones that particularly resonate with me are you hydrated? Because that's a thing that I'm gotten better about, but it's something that I struggle with. And then for me, the one about fighting sleep is really the worst one for me. That's something that I'm incredibly prone to do. I am exhausted at the end of the day, but I have a really hard time making myself go to sleep. So if I'm aware that I'm fighting sleep, that can help me. Or if I'm exhausted in the morning, hopefully sometimes that helps me, um, just think, okay, is it because you're fighting sleep at night? What are things that you can do at night to try to stop fighting sleep? But this is a really good video. We have it linked on the sources page. So if this is, this sort of checklist is really helpful. And some of these things are very simple, but can make a huge difference. Changing clothes is very helpful, can be very helpful. Taking a shower, stretching your legs.
Oh, stretching legs is a real challenge for me. I'll tell you all that. I'm a couch potato. I can hyper focus on anything with a screen like that. And so then all of a sudden, I'll come home on Friday and all of a sudden it's Monday and I haven't moved. Um, so
Yes. Yeah. And see, for me, I have children, so they help with a lot of those things. And I think that's actually why for me the sleep fighting is so bad, is because that's the only time that I have to myself. I think some people call it revenge bedtime procrastination. I've seen that term used before, and I think that's more of like a parenting term. But for me, as a parent who also has ADHD, it's like a double dose of sleep fighting. But these are all really good things just to kind of walk through. And again, it's presented in like she's very peppy video form. And so if you need a checklist to help kind of gauge where you're at, this is a really good one. I really like this one a lot. All right. Oh, and I just have to put in a quick plug, which they don't pay me, but they should, for the Finch app, because it's really cute and fun. and it's a self-care tool, and you get an adorable, does anybody else use Finch?
Here,
In the chat,
here's
any
mine.
use Finch?
I don't, oh, hold on. Let me turn off my screen, my background thingy so that you all can see my little Finch.
Oh, you have a Finch. I can't see because I'm sharing my screen, but
There he is.
I
There
love
they
my
are
Finch.
on an adventure today.
Yes.
And down below, you have little tasks and things.
Yes, yes. Jenny Dale, who has just posted in the chat, she's the one who told me about Finch, and I love Finch so much. It is you have a little burb and they're adorable, and you complete self-care tasks that you put in there. They also have things called journeys where they suggest tasks for you to do. I am perpetually on the journey called Just Survive the Day. And that one is very helpful for me. That's a very basic journey. But again, based on the checklist on the previous slide, a very basic journey is a good place for me to be. But it kind of gives you, as Ian was talking about earlier, the dopamine hit of, you earn diamonds and you send your little pet on an excursion, and you can dress them up in different clothes, and you have friends who come over and greet you and give you affirmations. So it's a great app. I think that, again, folks with ADHD tend to do things for a while and then abandon them. We're actually really great about that. But yeah, I just celebrated my 1 year anniversary, which means I'm pretty sure I've logged in almost every day for an entire year to this app. So it has been extremely helpful to remind me to, drink water, stretch, take a shower, take a walk, eat lunch away from my desk, all these sorts of things. It's been very extremely helpful for me. So I would recommend it. Um,
And unlike a plant, a pet, or a child, if you forget about it for long periods of time, it won't die.
that is true. That is a good point. But yes, again, this works for me. It's definitely not working for, and yeah, I think it works. It seems to work for Ian as well. It's not going to work for everybody. If it doesn't work for you, no worries. If you started a pet and you abandon them, they're fine. They're just off in the phone world somewhere, so don't worry about them. But this is just one of those tools that I personally find extremely helpful. Okay, so then the other thing I wanted to talk about, also thanks to Jenny Dale, who is amazing about telling me about all the cool wellness stuff that she knows about, and is really good at going out and seeking out information and then sharing it, which I appreciate very much. So she shared with me this idea that there are 7 types of rest. And this is Sandra Dalton Smith. And there's a link to a quiz that you can take that will give you your scores on these 7 types of rest. And we're not going to talk about all 7, but there are a couple that I think are particularly important for folks with ADHD. So I just wanted to talk about them really quickly. Mental rest, I think is important. It's just kind of overall keeping your, when your brain is tired, which, as we've discussed, is a thing that happens pretty frequently. Grounding yourself, noticing your surroundings. She gives us permission to watch some mindless TV, not hours of mindless TV, but some mindless TV. Scheduling activities that take a little thought. So I think this is really important thing to think about. And since I've been thinking about this whole idea of trying to quiet my mind, which is very difficult for people with ADHD, I believe, in my personal experience, but trying it and at least making a habit of trying to quiet your mind every day, take some deep breaths. Again, Finch has breathing exercises that you can do. But just taking time to intentionally try to do this is extremely helpful.
For those of you with Gen Zers in your life, this is what they mean by touch grass.
I don't even
I
know.
need to go touch grass. Like, just go outside, deal with nature for a second and calm yourself.
I like
Because,
that.
yeah,
I apparently don't hang out with Gen Zers, but I think that's pretty smart. Emotional rest, I think, is also very important. Find people around whom you can be yourself, and I think that I think is maybe particularly difficult for folks with ADHD, because I think a lot of times even close people in our lives, we can feel like we have to mask in front of them. So maybe try not doing that. Maybe try being yourself and see what happens. Um, Say no. That's a really hard one. Um, Tell people how you're feeling. If you feel ignored, unappreciated, let people know. And do things to take care of your emotions. Oh, I'm also a big fan of crying. I'm not a big fan of crying. That's the wrong way to say that. But crying is extremely helpful. It can be extremely helpful, which she acknowledges in here as well.
yeah, one of the best things you can do for emotional rest is to find people that have the same struggle and maybe don't like complain to each other about it, but just like be a space for each other where you don't have to do that, right? Some of the most emotionally restful times that I've had is when I'm just around other ADHD folks, other queer folks, and we can just like kiki, and just don't worry about staying on topic. Don't worry about being too loud. Don't worry about interrupting each other. Like just be crazy little things that I probably shouldn't say in a professional setting. Um,
Yeah, yes, I have a couple people in my life that we talk about, like when we squirrel from one topic to another, we talk about the path, it's like, oh, let me just tell you how I got from this point to this point. And it's actually pretty funny to, say, oh, well, I thought about this, which made me think of this, which made me think of this. And so it's funny to have people in your life that can explain how you got from point A to point Q or Z. Um, because usually people just kind of look at you funny when you ask a question that makes total sense to you, but not they haven't followed the same mental path that you followed. So that's one thing that I find um, makes me feel a lot better, is just having somebody that I can explain that to and who understands how that works.
a friend of mine and I actually made that into a game. We would like come up with a topic, be silent for 2 minutes, and then explain to each other where we got and how.
Oh, I love that idea. Oh, that's fun. That sounds great. Oh, I want to do that. All right. So then sensory rest, I think, is related to mental rest in a lot of ways. Um, but, this is, of course, taking breaks from electronics, artificial light, phones, all those distractions, and just trying to engage your senses. I have been going for walks without my audiobook, which is difficult, but it's nice to hear the birds and all those sorts of things. So that's, I think just sensory rest is kind of just giving yourself a break from that constant input that we get all the time. And also I think just to let people know when you are kind of at your sensory max, and taking a break when needed, is a really good idea. Like I have gotten much more, I guess I won't say aggressive, assertive about telling my family when, hey, this is too loud and I need a break. So give me a few minutes and I will be back with you shortly.
And an important thing to remember here is that your needs are different than other people's. And you've come from something other than where they've come from, in terms of your schedule for the day. You don't have to have more stamina than everybody else to keep up with everybody else all the time. Just because somebody else can do something for 5 more minutes doesn't mean that you have to.
Really good point. Great. All right, so here's, again, we're going to share a link to our slides in just a minute, but there is a quiz. You get lovely emails from her when you register, but you do have to register. And then there's links to a couple of how to ADHD videos as well. Okay, so just this is a real quick wrap up because as we said earlier, we're not great at the end. So to me, the ending was like, okay, we did some things, so that's it. So again, prioritizing work-life balance is difficult. We do have to trick our brains. Yes, and unfortunately, self-care is more than candles and massages, which is really not fair because that stuff you can do, light a candle or something. But apparently, there's a lot more to it than that, which just seems quite unfair, honestly. But oh well. So I think that's all of our content. We will put, when I stop sharing my screen, I will post a link to the slides in the chat. But I will now stop sharing my screen and we can see if there's any questions or any conversations that folks want to have. Hey, there y'all are. Hello.
Hey, thanks so much, Amy and Ian. This was fantastic. I was jotting down notes throughout the session, but we have one question in the Q&A right now from Carrie asking, have you seen anything in the literature that you've researched about the correlations between addictive tendencies / behaviors and ADHD?
Yes. The short answer is yes, absolutely. And I, of course, am not a medical expert or anything like that, but from what I have seen, that folks, I think a lot of times, because of that dopamine processing issue, that folks will go to, things that are not good for us to get those dopamine hits, and that can be, compulsive shopping or gambling or substances to try to meet those dopamine needs. So yeah, so that's what I have seen. I mean, I've seen, I know that statistics exist. I don't know what they are, but that I think that the dopamine kind of gets to the issues of why those two things are closely related. Also, of course, ADHD, some ADHD medications are similar to illegal substances. So if folks are, unable to pursue diagnosis or to get prescriptions, they may turn to illegal substances to try to accomplish that goal as well.
Yeah, particularly Ritalin and Concerta and Adderall are amphetamines. They are stimulants. What they actually do is stimulate a part of the brain that gives us more time to kind of speed bump ourselves mentally. And again, not a medical professional, but if I remember something I read a while back correctly, Ritalin in particular was only 2 chemical markers away from crystal meth. So again, don't quote me, but that's if I remember correctly. And those very critical chemical markers, but very, very close together, similar to oxy and opium in that way.
Yeah, there's also a subgenre of ADHD memes that are along the lines of, sorry if this is inappropriate, but like I did fill in stimulant illegal drug with my friends and they all were wild and crazy for 24 hours and I alphabetized the bookshelf because it actually has the opposite effect on folks with ADHD that it does on
Yes.
who do not. So
Actually, a lot of times with children with ADHD, you can actually help them out by giving them caffeine.
yes.
I don't suggest giving them the sugar that often goes with caffeine.
Right.
But if you can find a way, teach your kid to like coffee. Or put a little bit of, invert a latte, put a little bit of coffee in with a lot of milk. that can actually help
Yeah. Yep.
because
Yes,
the
that was
caffeine will
another
stimulate in
thing
the same way.
that I realized that I had been kind of self-medicating with caffeine for basically my entire adult life. I had no idea that I was doing that, but I was.
Any recommendations for those taking MLIS how to better focus during a 3-hour Teams meeting? You know what? I just came out of that situation. And my best suggestion, yeah, actually, puzzles can be great. They don't work for everybody. I would sometimes get too caught up in my own internal thoughts. Um, of like, oh, blackjack, I need to put a blackjack on the red queen. But fidgets, coloring, knitting, something that your part of your brain can do and be constantly running and thinking, knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, purl 1. I mean, yes, absolutely. You have to distract a part of yourself to be able to get the part that you want to focus.
Right. Yes. Also changing position can help. Standing for a while, then sitting for a while, doing a couple of, if your camera's off, a couple of jumping jacks or some standing yoga or sitting yoga or just something to kind of, yes, kind of redirect your brain, but also like some light distraction.
I'll paint my nails during class.
Oh, that's a good one. Because that
Just
takes a little bit of attention.
give yourself a manicure while you listen to a
I
lecture.
like that.
For those of us who also like to chat during class, that can be a little bit tricky, but you find what works.
Yeah, I agree, Carrie. Most of my classes when I went through the MLIS program, which was a million years ago, was in person. So folks were doing things like, knitting and things like that in person, which is fine, but also just like plays a little differently to the crowd. I'm a doodler, also a pin clicker, which people hate in person. But